Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kizma. This episode is super exciting because it's a continuation of last week's episode, which was on mindset. But in today's episode, we're going to go deeper and get super clear on mindset for prosperity, for your money, for your wealth, for creating a magnificent and abundance life. Welcome to the Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kizma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can sparkle just a little bit brighter each and every day. If what you hear speaks to your soul, go ahead and give us a rating and a review in iTunes. You can also find us on SoundCloud and Stitcher. And hey, if there's somebody in your life that you think would enjoy this podcast, go ahead and share it with them. Well, hey there, Nick.
Hey, Kizma.
How are you?
I am fantastic.
Good. How was your week?
The week was great. Quite busy, as always. It just seems like there's lots and lots of things to do. Things are continuing to ramp up, which is always very exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah, and it's nice to have a day to just podcast, get a few other minor things done and have a little bit of space. I really enjoy that.
Well, I think that's definitely applicable to what we're talking about today in the mindset for prosperity is space. And we'll get to that in a second. But, you and I were sort of jamming earlier. What are we going to talk about on the podcast? And, the mindset episode last week was so cool, but there's more to it. And we know that many of our listeners are really wanting more prosperity in all ways of their life. I mean, prosperity isn't just about money, but it's about this expansion, right? This space, a bigger and greater way of being, doing, and having.
Yeah. And it's something that I certainly hear a lot of challenges around that. And it what's ironic, I think, is it actually has very little to do with how much actual money the human being has.
Yes.
And more to do with how they relate to it.
Absolutely. This is the key to mastering one's wealth and life. And I know that I've had clients come to me with large amounts of money in their bank account in a really amazing business, yet they had a lack mentality and energy that we worked on and cleared. So it's not about how much money you have. It's about, like you said, the attitude towards it and the ability to create this mindset that takes one on what I like to call the divine success track.
Right. And to really have an attitude and a process for continuing to cultivate prosperity.
Yes.
So when you think about prosperity, what does prosperity mean to you?
Oh, prosperity to me really is about embodying this joyful state, about being very present to the present moment and understanding that at this present moment, you have the ability to create miracles because everything is a miracle. And it's the ability to see space and increase in all things, whether it's money, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in, creating perfect health. It's that understanding that we're not in a box. Our conditioned personality is not the real us. There's such a greater field for us to expand into.
So it affects literally, in my mind too, it's something that applies certainly to wealth and money, but to all areas
Absolutely.
Of life.
To friendships, to relationships, to your own self-valuation, how one looks in the mirror and sees themselves, to your ability to enjoy every moment of life, or at least to navigate every moment of life expertly.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And with so much more ease.
Yes, mastery, the whole thing.
And that's one of the things that days like this remind me of, is that it's easy to get caught up into that do, next, which is not entirely bad in the sense that it keeps you in positive momentum. It keeps you really moving forward and towards, your highest goals. But when you lose that sense of spaciousness, when you feel time starts to really compress, that can be not only stressful, but actually extremely unproductive. It's the total opposite of productive.
It totally is. I mean, if we look at just the energetic perspective, because I know last week we talked a lot about the energetic presence underneath a mindset. If we're always going, and we start to constrict our energy, our field, everything will constrict, right? Our wealth container, our love container, it's like getting smaller and smaller, where I believe like the mindset and the potentiality and the possibility is to expand into it. Now, potentiality isn't all there is. One has to take action, right? Like you said, it's so much better to do rather than stop. But there is this measurement. There's a metric of it, I believe, where you understand that there's work to be done and action to be taken. But when it's coming from this, I have to do it, it doesn't turn out so well.
Yeah. It compromises the quality of the action, and it also stresses out the human being.
I was just with a client today. She's so cool. And we were talking about the difference between demanding like attention, demanding wealth, demanding success. And to me, when someone's demanding, it shows a sense of weakness. Like, well, I don't have it, so I'm just going to demand all this attention, all this stuff to come my way. And it creates force. On the flip side, if you command it, right? If you command your reality, just like we manifest, command your manifestation, that is equal to this power and this true strength in your field. It's like a presence. Command equals presence, and demand really equals weakness.
So this might seem a little bit weird of a question, but we have this little cat. She's so cute. She's this little tiny black cat, Sabrina. Yeah. And she has this way of getting these big humans to do exactly what she wants. Golly. Does she do it through, and she'll just meow. And sure enough, we're giving her food. We're opening up the door, and what I'm curious about is she doing that through demanding or commanding?
I think she's pretty much commanding the reality. I mean, that's like this cat I got in Hong Kong, believe it or not. She's probably 16 years old. And this little whippersnapper is like, this is my house, people. She bosses Lenny around. She bosses us around. It's pretty hilarious. Yeah.
I think she does do it through command.
Pretty much.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Little tiny thing. But really to me, the lesson around that is that her size matters not.
Exactly.
Her ability to communicate via, language does not matter. Mm-hmm. She is able to communicate exactly what she wants and get it.
Exactly.
And by human beings who are, 10 times, 20 times her size,
right.
So it's pretty fascinating to watch that unfold, and also to watch myself in that process of like, yep, I'm totally opening that door for you. Of course I'll open that door for you. I'd love to open that door for you again and again. So there's a saying and a phrase from Catherine Ponder that I know that you're really fond of, and I'm wondering if you can speak about it. The phrase is, there is gold dust in the air.
Well, what I love is when I threw this idea out to you earlier today, like, hey, let's talk about prosperity mindset. And then we came back together, we were taking a walk, and we were just jamming on what we were going to talk. And Nick said, oh, well, we need to talk about there's gold dust in the air. And I'm like, that's exactly what I was thinking about. And this we'll put a link in our show notes to Catherine Ponder's book, which is The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. It's amazing. And in the 60s, humans believed they were coming upon the most prosperous time ever. And she references some of the scientists, and very likely, scientists that were beginning to understand quantum, and that whatever the universe was made of, we are made of that as well. And this beautiful etheric matter that is all pervading and all giving and all encompassing. This is what we're made of. And so it's like there is gold dust in the air. There's enough gold dust for everyone. The question is, are we going to focus on the gold dust, or are we going to focus on the ashes?
Where you put your attention, it brings us back to that, yes. What you believe is your truth, as you think, so you become all of these teachings that thread throughout.
Right.
And in the practical world, one of the ways that I relate to this is just walking down our path. Walking into town, there's this beautiful path. And when I think about that, I kind of like, it's springtime here in California. Mm-hmm. And this is really the first spring that we've really experienced out here because of the drought. And it is amazing. Like I'm finally seeing what the landscape artist had in mind. And it's so abundant.
Right.
But beyond that, even as you're walking on this beautiful path, I think about, how amazing that our community was able to generate the resources to build this.
Yes.
Right. There's, and I wonder how much that cost. It was probably quite expensive just so that we could have a beautiful path to walk, from here to town.
Right.
It's so amazing. And you look at it like that and all around us, so much prosperity. And I think for a lot of people, it seems just out of reach.
It seems just out of reach. Or what I know is happening is that in today's world, through the media, people are being exposed to lack and fear over and over and over again. And so, when we speak about the conditioned personality, if you've heard us talk about this before, it's like, this isn't really you. This is your personality with all the beliefs that have been plastered upon it, all the, emotional identities you've taken on, which isn't you 2.0. So it's nobody's fault that they're looking through a lens of lack, and it requires, effort and design and strategies and focus and commitment to increase your wealth. You just can't sit on the sofa and think about it like the movie The Secret. You've got to be out there taking action, because action is the insignia of life. But it's what we see. I'm just going to give a shout out to Crystal Gregg. She's this amazing student in my Science of Spirituality course, and she's a teacher. And I remember when she joined the Facebook group after she purchased the course, and she put a post, and I was like, okay, here we go. It was a tough moment for her. She felt like some of the children weren't listening. It was just whatever. And she has created a miracle because she was willing to see the miracles around her. Her focus and perception changed. And once that changed, it's like you just said, your energy goes where your thoughts flow. She began to attract more miracles towards her. Small miracles, but meaningful miracles.
Yeah. And it just comes back to recognizing those things. Like if you want to invoke divine abundance, it is not about, it maybe starts with some gratitude, but that quickly becomes a true sense of awe of like, oh my gosh, this world is functioning so meticulously, even if it doesn't look like that.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I think you bring up a really good point. Like, when's the last time that we saw a news story that really highlighted the fact that, hey, by the way, there's totally enough for everybody?
Yeah, no, they're not going to say that because they want people to be in fear and lack and worry and competition. And just, it's really, my biggest recommendation is turn on the news so you know what's going on, and then turn it off.
Yeah.
Maybe turn it on, twice a week, or have your favorite publication that you go to, see the stories, make sure like, okay, things are rolling. And then turn it off, because otherwise you're bringing that frequency is so low and so fear-based and so lack-based. You really don't even want it playing in your house, because that will then bring, I know it sounds crazy, people, but trust me, it will lower the frequency of your house.
Yeah. And we're already contending with enough of that. It's one of the things that I talk about in Energy Mastery as well is you don't even have to ever turn on the news to be exposed to that, because everybody else, there's so many people around you and they're bringing that with them. They're carrying that same energy with them. So you're already exposed to it.
Yeah.
And it is very much like a disease.
Yeah.
Lack.
Truly unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. But it acts like a virus, like lack thinking. And here's a really interesting thing is as I mentioned before, many people like to make it about the money. Lacking in money, lacking in funds, which seems, in my experience, totally independent of what they actually have in their bank account.
Yes.
I've seen people with extremely little money find ways to make things happen that are truly extraordinary.
Yes.
And I've seen people with plenty of resources stop because they don't feel like they have enough.
Exactly.
Now, but what I find that's also very interesting around that highlights the really underlying issue is that when somebody's stuck in lack, they like to make it about money, but it shows up in the other areas. Time,
energy, food, relationships, love, space, the whole thing.
So if you take the time to look just below the surface and you see that same attitude showing up in other areas, you can be sure that it has way less to do with the thing that you're making about,
right,
and much more to do with that underlying attitude of lack.
Exactly.
Which becomes really problematic.
And then it will easily take a person into a taker, right? Well, I'm going to take this, or looking at other people and having jealousy or wondering why they have more. And it causes a whole messy karmic situation.
Right. It really does. It just makes a mess. Which really brings us then to the second point that I wanted to talk about is how to create space. To let go, to clean house, so to speak.
Well, how do you do it?
Well, I think you can look at it from some different angles. There's certainly the physical level. And I'm always...
super important.
Yeah. And I'm always really inspired by you. You seem to have this amazing gift for when you are done with something, you're done.
Goodbye. See you later.
It's all done.
Yeah. There's no hoarding in this house.
Yeah. You're just, if it's that shirt, even if it's a beautiful shirt,
done,
that you love, but you just know that it's done, you're done.
Yeah. This is a really important, everyone listen carefully, because it is so easy to hang on to old stuff. And I used to teach a webinar on this. It was so fun. And I'd say, hey, how many of you have that really special dress that you bought for a special occasion and you haven't worn it? And it's tucked way in the back of your closet. And they're like, oh my gosh, I have it. Or your purse or your suit, if you're a man, or shoes. I'm like, get that sucker out and wear it tomorrow. Because the thing is, you're not valuing that you're good enough for the frock, and you're hoarding it, waiting for the perfect moment instead of putting it on and going and creating your own perfect moment.
Right. The law of use.
The law of use. Use what you have. And if you're not using it, please give it to someone who could use it.
Well, I was just going to say, like, what do you recommend for people who feel like that could be wasteful or seen as wasteful or over consuming?
Well, what do you mean over consuming?
I just mean like, single serving type of stuff where it's, all of a sudden we just become in that consumer mode of more and more and more. No. Oh, I'm done with that. Give me more.
Well, I mean, if you give it purposefully away, it's not over. You're helping someone. I mean, don't throw your clothes away, for crying out loud. Clothes are made to be given because they can be worn.
Right.
Yeah. And then as well, the other law of use is if you're going to buy something, buy only what you really love. Like, don't start buying stuff because it's on sale. You will be disappointed and you won't wear it. And it's going to be like, this is the funny thing. We had a friend who told the story. She went shopping and she had the money, right, for this really cool pair of shoes. And they were maybe $200 more than she'd ever pay before. And she didn't get them. But then over the next 10 days, she went on a trip and she was shopping and she went to stores that said, hey, 50% off, discount here. And she found herself, like, she could see it. It was like an out of body experience where she saw herself shopping and buying just a bunch of stuff because it was on sale and cheap. And she ended up spending way more than $200 with a bunch of crap that she didn't want.
Right. Get what you want.
Get what you want. Don't settle, right? Get what you want, wear it. And then what you don't need, please give away. So much abundance will come your way if you do this. So much.
It makes me think of the conductor, Frubeck de Burgos.
Oh,
and his so special good. Shirt. Remember his special shirt?
I think he did have 10 of them, but that's okay.
But it was like he found this shirt that he just loved.
Yeah.
And that was his uniform.
Right.
And maybe he had several of them.
Yeah, because you're rehearsing and conducting. And there's something to be said for that. I was in this program, I give a shout out to Todd Herman, who talks about this Prada protocol, which is you just know what you're going to wear. You have your uniform. I haven't figured out mine yet. It's kind of frustrating. I think it's easier for men, but what are those shirts that you love? What are those jeans or pants that you love? And you buy that, and then you're not wasting time thinking about what am I going to wear the next day.
Right. And I just always appreciated that because when I first met him and saw him, that shirt was so striking.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's an amazing shirt. I just told him, I was like, that's an amazing shirt, and then I saw it the rest of the week and I became a little confused, but then I finally figured it out. I'm like, oh, that's
wearing it for you.
Yeah, it's his uniform, But I think that's important. Now, that's just on a material level.
Yeah.
Now, on a more subtle level, which I think is even more impactful in certain ways, is the emotions and the thoughts that we carry around with us.
Right.
And one of the biggest ones that I have seen that really kills prosperity is resentment.
Oh, it kills prosperity. It hurts the physical body, creates a lot of negative self-talk.
Yeah. So what do you think as far as letting go of those things? People say, just let go, just let go, well, you should just let go of that. But it seems it's a little more challenging, I think, in practice. Those things can be kind of sticky.
They are sticky. I mean, we did that whole podcast on letting go. We'll put it in the show notes. But it's, for one thing, awareness has to happen. Any sort of true transformation, true spiritual elevation, enlightenment, first comes awareness. Because once you're aware that, whoa, I'm carrying resentment. Resentment is very close to anger, jealousy. It's like a low-grade fever that slowly just chips away at your soul and your body. And once you see that, then it's the awareness and being willing to notice when it comes up and then to inquire. Oh, wow, I seem to be really resentful towards this person. Why? And if you're really honest, I believe if you're really honest, you can thread it back and pretty much see that most of these confrontations, altercations, awkward situations, disagreements, whatever, have nothing. It's so much to do about the other person, their beliefs, and you and your beliefs. And we tend to take things personally. And we should, in fact, just acknowledge everybody has a right to their own point of view. So I believe, I don't know what you think, Nick, it's like shining the light on it and being willing to be like, all right, I don't want that in my field. I don't want to carry it. And just letting it go, perhaps a little bit of forgiveness goes a long way.
Yeah. I think if people could see energetically what that does to the system, they would be shocked out of that, and to really understand how important it is to let those things go.
It really would be.
I did this amazing forgiveness meditation at the beginning of the year, and then it was so profound for me. I just decided I want to start 2017 lighter than 2016, and I had just started reading this book, actually, the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, and she started talking about forgiveness, and I was like, oh yeah, I know where to find this amazing forgiveness meditation. So I started doing it daily, and I think I did it every day for a couple weeks, and it radically changed.
Really
yeah, I mean, you tell me.
Yeah, I just one day I was like, what the heck are you doing? You're so much lighter, like you're more positive. I mean, not that Nick's like a big negative, emotional bunny or dust bunny, but I was just like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I've been doing this meditation.
Just doing this thing every day.
Science of Meditation, everyone. We'll put the link in there too, because that's a great training, which has the forgiveness and healing meditation in it.
Right. And it's so important. And forgiveness is a way of letting go. So what happens then, if you look at it just energetically, it's basically like that's poison that you're holding on to. So not only is it toxic for your system, but it's also clogging up the works.
Yes.
So energy can't flow. So everything starts to collapse inward.
Yeah.
And that makes that's where you'll start to see that lack really starting to show up, because it's not an inaccurate perception, because you really in that state don't have access to the energy, to the time, to the perception to be able to have a sense of abundance. Everything starts to collapse in, the world gets much, much smaller, and then you shrink in order to match that.
And here's something I've seen people do time and time again. It's very, very interesting. As their gaze and their judgment and their emotions go outwards towards other people with resentment, with jealousy, with blaming, their own internal presence shrinks. It's like they're giving away their energy in their field as attention to other beings, where it should is a strong word, but when we look at ourselves, like I said, that awareness piece, that's the place to reside.
Yeah. Rather than should, it's a really, to me, it's a simple, if you want more energy and prosperity, if you want more of that in every area of your life, then this is what you want to do.
Exactly.
You want to be able to let go of those things in some way, shape, or form. Forgiveness is a really big piece of that, because relationships with other human beings can get so sticky so fast. It, like you said, it's very other oriented.
Right.
So that draws the gaze away from you, what you can work on, what you can do to shift in yourself to make that change in your life. life.
Right.
And it disempowers you by putting all of that out there somewhere else. And I know that I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this that would say like, oh, I don't judge people. Like, I'm not like that, no. But really and truly somewhere in there, every human being has these things because we're human beings, because we have personalities, and the way that those personalities interact and intersect, it becomes inherently sticky and entangled.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I mean, one would say maybe we're judging all the time. We're really assessing all the time. We're making assessments. And judging can be used in different ways. What we're talking about here is when you're casting out anger, when you're trying to get into somebody else's business or life and understand it and figure it out, you're out of your own. You're redirecting your attention away from yourself, getting entangled and enmeshed and creating chaos and frenetic energy, trying to figure out other people's stuff. And it's not your gig.
Totally not.
Yeah.
But you bring us to the third point that I wanted to make here, which I think is really important, is non-attachment or non-grasping.
Oh, that's so good.
And so it's like any other energy. The nature of prosperity energy is to move and flow.
Yes.
And when you try to grasp it and hold it out of fear, it shrinks.
Yes.
And you ultimately wind up losing it. This is how people make a ton of money and then just wind up losing it, right? They want to hold and grasp, and it actually winds up slipping right through your fingers.
Exactly.
So when we talk about non-attachment in the context of prosperity, I think about it more as keeping a sense of flow, an inflow and an outflow. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I mean, it's cliche, money is energy, but it really is. And when it's flowing out, it's flowing too, as long as it's a wise flowing out. Right? I've seen people break their money by deciding, oh, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to take this trip, or, all of a sudden I'm going to buy all this because I'm making money, but they haven't invested back into their business. Right. So if you're building a business and all of a sudden you begin to make money, awesome. Invest back into your business. If you're, working on yourself, I mean, this is why so many people come to us and just invest in trainings or courses or one-on-one, because they understand their own essence, their own being is the most valuable thing that they could ever work on.
And the people, this is something that I've noticed also, is the people that really are in that grasping, holding state, in the lack mentality around that, create a ton of drama about making that decision.
Yeah.
And that's the point where it can kind of go either way. And that choice point is really important because you have opportunities in your life. You are consistently presented with opportunities. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? Right? What am I going to do here?
Right.
And when you are at that choice point and an opportunity to step into something bigger, more expansive, something that's really supportive for you at the highest levels,
right,
and then you walk away from that, that is going to wind up costing you more down the road.
Exactly.
It's
totally.
It'll cost you. And like your example with the shoes.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, what a great example, right? It actually cost more money
to have crappy stuff,
to have the things that you didn't really even want. And then if you really want to get what you want, now you still have to go back and get that. So it winds up costing you more than twice as much, which is a very conservative situation.
Yeah.
I've seen it cost people 10 times as much, 20 times as much.
We'll get to that in a moment when we talk about the law of increase, but it's like, if you don't get what you want, you're going to be frustrated and you're going to end up going for it, and you're going to have spent so much more money, time, energy, frustration in the process.
Right. And the old way of looking at money is, I'm going to stockpile this certain amount throughout my life, and then I'm going to hope that sees me through to, my end.
Yeah.
Right. And really, it's about, this is in my mind anyway, is as you create these different pools that you continue to invest, and then those investments have an opportunity to nurture and grow in themselves.
Right.
And that's prosperity mindset. But many people, I won't say most people, but I will say many people get stuck in that idea of like, oh, well, it's a risk. I might lose, and then what? So then they never ever step into that place of allowing the sense of prosperity to continue to grow and really nurturing that
and flowing back. Yes, totally agree.
And that brings us to the last point.
Well, it was something I wanted to share because we're sounding pretty lofty and awesome here, right? Like prosperity mindset. But I also know that people can get into a very discouraged and frustrated state. And that always saddens me because I've been there. I know what that feels like. And it's almost like, well, this is cool. This works for everyone else and it never works for me. And that really isn't true. So I thought, we've been referencing Catherine Ponder. She was such an amazing author, and we'll definitely put a link in the show notes to grab her book. But I wanted to read just a little bit from her book about overcoming discouragement and disappointment. It was so meaningful when I saw it. And this is what she says. When you are tempted to become discouraged in your efforts towards greater prosperity, remind yourself that to think according to the general beliefs of the human race is easy and useless. So let me highlight that. You can think according to the general beliefs. Remember, we're talking about that conditioned state, what everyone's showing you, what everyone's putting out there. It's easy to follow that herd, but it's also a useless path. And then she goes on to say, but to think prosperously in spite of appearances to the contrary is worth every effort because it produces rich results. One editor has often said to me, remember, Catherine, the majority is always wrong. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that is the best paragraph in this entire book. And it's like invoke that law of increase. She's describing a universal law of increase. There's also a law of decrease. Well, according to where your thoughts are going, you will see one or the other operating. And she says it does take effort, but it's worth every effort to train your mind to avoid disappointment and, to expect things to come into your manifestation, right? To expect it, but to also be willing to take action. It's just such a magical understanding of the universal laws.
There's so much in that that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
It made me think of that Mark Twain quote, whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect.
Yes, totally.
Right. And but it's so easy to forget that because that's so safe. That's what we know. And that's what's really been reinforced in our own thinking time and time and time again. And I think at the core of that, what really sticks out to me is this sense of faith.
Yes.
A sense of understanding that there is a higher law at play here.
Yes.
And having the willingness to step into that. Now, in whatever way you can. I know that it can be scary to take a huge leap and to just jump in with both feet. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even encouraging people do that. What I'm saying is find your next step. Mm-hmm. And take your next step. And when you can take that next step, let that build a little bit more confidence for you, a little bit more faithfulness.
Totally. And one of the steps you can actually take, everyone, that's not going to cost you any money, is to allow and direct this prosperous thinking, this law of increase for other people. Because when we look at human nature again, it is often the mind will go out to other people like, well, why does Betty Sue have that? Or I can't believe she made that, or he's got this. And that is like a chip away at your own prosperity. And she talks about this as well. She's like, don't waste time holding a grudge. And even if someone has treated you unjustly, if they're turning their path around, this was such a beautiful thing that she talked about. If someone is coming back from doing some things that weren't too cool, and you see that sort of resurrection of their spirit of like this positivity, really like embrace them, bless them, give them like a little increase in their world, because then whatever skeletons you have in your closet will magically be eliminated as well. It's like what you give out, you receive. So if you're thinking about somebody, wish them prosperity, give them a blessing, ask what you can do to support someone, right? Pick up the phone, send a text, send a card, wish them all the prosperity and ask how you can support. When you uphold your fellow man, because we're all interconnected in that realm of prosperous thinking, you're doing it for yourself times 10.
Mm-hmm. That in itself is so incredibly powerful. And how we think about other people.
Yeah.
I remember one time with the Innovators. The Innovators Circle is a group that's led by Siobhan Moran. It's a group that we've been a part of and we now support that group in different ways. And one of the things that we did together was to go out in an affluent community where you would never think that there would be a huge homeless community and go feed homeless people.
Right.
And I'm not talking about this because it's like, oh, well, look at us. Like, that's so benevolent. It was truly humbling.
Yeah.
Because I learned so many things about my judgments around people, what I thought a homeless person was supposed to look like, and which was radically different and extremely not accurate. And then also, what that can mean. So I could have gone into that, and anybody can go into that situation and with that sense of pity of like, oh, well, here, and look at me, aren't I so benevolent?
Yeah.
Or you can go into it with like, wow, this sandwich may be the thing that they need to take their next step.
Exactly.
Fill
their stomach. Yeah.
And rather than seeing them in their lack or struggle, to really see the possibility and the potential within those human beings.
Yeah.
It was one of the most profound experiences I can remember.
Yeah.
And I would encourage everybody to do that. Don't go selfieing yourself and tweeting about it. We're only talking, I've never talked about this before. The only reason we're talking about it now is just because it is such an incredibly powerful way to shift your energy when you feel stuck, when you feel really lacking, when you feel just really like, to make some sandwiches and go out and find some homeless and really just feed them and do it with a grateful heart.
Yeah. Giving something, that was another thing she highlighted. There was a woman who was a widow and just in great poverty, and she needed money to buy groceries. And so, she asked for some help from this author, and she said, go give something. She's like, I have nothing to give. And she's like, oh, yes, you do. Look around. And what ended up happening is this widow looked out her door and she had all these wildflowers in her garden. So she thought about a neighbor, and she grabbed the flowers and she walked down the street, knocked on the door, and gave them to this neighbor who was nearly in tears because no one ever brought her flowers. And then she did something like some act of kindness. And before you know it, somebody had stopped by and gave her $30 that they owed her, which was the exact amount she needed to go buy dinner for her children. It was like it's just these miracles happen all the time. And they're our miracles. They're miracles of past, they're miracles of now, and they're miracles of the future.
Well, I think it's important to highlight that is such an amazing story, that a miracle is something that your brain won't necessarily make sense of.
Yes.
Right. And so that's kind of what defines it as a miracle.
Yes.
It's a universal law that we simply don't understand at work. And so, that may seem like a magical story, but what I would encourage everybody who hears this podcast to do is to go create a miracle for yourself. And you do it by changing that energy.
Changing the energy, changing the perception, noticing them, right? Because, this is a whole nother podcast, but in essence, everything's a miracle and we don't really understand anything. Start talking about the eye and how it beholds vision and goes into your brain. Start talking about how many people created the technology for us to record and for you to listen. It's pretty inconceivable.
It is. And to start, but I think that the empowering part about it is to start by going create your own miracle.
Yes.
Changing the energy. When you're on lack or you're focused on what everybody else has, it's really comes back to you. It's what they have that you don't.
Right.
It's a focus on what I need and what I don't have and how I feel about it. And it's I.
Oh, take out the I, take out the mine.
Changing the energy is really just about focusing on the other. How can I see the potential in another? How can I support that potential in another?
Right.
What can I give into the world that's truly meaningful, that can lift up just one little life? You don't have to go out there and feel like you have to save the world or save every person. Right. Go help one person.
Absolutely.
And that is such a profound thing in itself.
Yeah, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Well, thanks everyone. Please write in how you felt about this, info@sourcemovement.com, or there's a little place you can post notes under the show notes and grab the book. We have a link in our show notes as well. And super appreciate each and every one of you for listening.
Peace.
Namaste.